US president is right. He's got at least one thing absolutely right. If you show your strength and you show that you're a capable nation and that there are consequences to trampling over your interests, you are more likely not to have to face a conflict situation.
Emmanuel Macron is hosting another Coalition of the Willing summit in an hour's time, where European leaders will get a chance to speak to Donald Trump's emissaries Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner. The aim is to finalise US security guarantees to Ukraine, but Trump's threats to Denmark and his actions in Venezuela will certainly be the elephant in the room. Let's speak to Penny Morduant, the former Conservative Defence Secretary and chair of the Coalition for Global Prosperity. Good to speak to you.
Hello.
Hello. Can I pick up the interview that I just had with the ambassador, where we spoke about the extraordinary possibility that Danish troops could end up having to resist a US intervention? You understand the politics of this. You know that if British government was threatened in this way by any kind of power, including the United States, it would have to react in some way. So what advice would you give the Danish in how they react to this kind of language from Stephen Miller and from Donald Trump?
Look, I can understand how upsetting and distressing it is to hear that, but I am actually more optimistic about this situation. I think that the Trump administration says particular things and sometimes it carries out those actions, but with others, it uses this as a device to get things done that it cares about. I think this is a very different situation that we're looking at in Greenland compared to other parts of the world where Trump has actually physically intervened. And I think that although it's shocking what they're saying, their concerns are rational. There are genuine security concerns that the United States has about that particular part of the world and also about Europe's focus on its own neighbourhood and what it's prepared to do to defend its own interests as well as the interests of the United States. So I personally think that this is a device that the White House is using to try and gain traction and focus on additional measures, particularly around defence and security, that it wants to see in that part of the world. So I'm a bit more optimistic than some other guests that have been on.
So just to be clear, you think that, for example, this may be a negotiating technique to get more bases, more facilities in Greenland?
Yes, I mean we've seen the president use other things like tariffs, for example. Tariffs are not part of their trade policy. Tariffs are sticks to beat up governments to get things over the line that they've been trying to get. And the United States, I think, is very frustrated. It's spent a long time, not just under the Trump administration, but previous administrations, trying to get Britain and other NATO members to spend more on defence, for example. And we're still not doing it, despite all the dramas, despite all the rhetoric and promises. And that is concerning. And I understand where the US is coming from on that front. So I hope I'm not wrong. But I think this is a device to say, buck up.
On the other issue that will be the elephant in the room on Venezuela, the UK government's in a bit of a bind, isn't it? Because it thinks it's a good idea to get rid of Maduro, but it must have some concerns, I'm sure you would have done in office, about the way this was done and about this promise, this expansive promise to rule Venezuela, which is an open-ended promise. It's hard to see how they deliver on. So some of those things would have been causing you concern. How does a government weave its way between those things, between saying, for example, we care about international law, and then seeing the government, the United States government, do something that is in breach of that?
I think this plays to a wider issue that the Prime Minister and the Foreign Office really have to get ahead of and work out their thinking on this. We know the world is changing dramatically. A lot of the conventions that were written that are part of what we refer to as the rules-based order were written a very long time ago. And some of them still serve us extremely well. Others do not. So it's in everyone's interest. And I think our public understand this as well, why things like the Geneva Convention are a good idea, why it's important and in our direct interests that we're not torturing or harming enemy forces when they're prisoners of war. Other conventions, just to pick one, the Refugee Convention was written at a time when no one had a mobile phone. It was no good. It's just not fit for purpose in the modern world. And I think we can go back to those principles about what those things were trying to do when they were first penned, and try and rewrite them for the modern world. We're always going to be in a situation where we're in this uncomfortable position unless we get on the front foot and recognise what's fit for the modern world. So I think this is a wider
Well, exactly.
problem.
And actually, that's why I kind of asked you about it, because it leads into the questions about Ukraine and about the security guarantee, because obviously any kind of security guarantee is only as strong as the coalition behind it is, and as the American commitment and will is, whatever they might initially say. So how should they frame this kind of guarantee? Is any guarantee from Donald Trump at this point worth having, actually? Seem to have lost
guarantees are put in place. They have to be able to, sorry.
I lost you briefly. Why don't you start the answer again, sir? In case I wasn't there, any person to lose you.
Speaking from a Holiday Inn in Wales. I've been on a tour, so sorry about the internet connection. But look, I think whatever you put in place, it has to survive beyond existing politicians. It has to survive into the future, post-Trump administration, post-Starmer, post-Macron, and so the triggers for when you would actually take action against, say, further hostile and aggressive action from Russia is really important. That's why people like Maloney have said, why are we trying to reinvent the wheel? Why don't we just use the umbrella of NATO to do this? The power of NATO is that the rules of engagement are set. You know what you're going to do to Russia if Russia does something to you. And that is how it acts as a deterrent, and it's a very effective deterrent. The problem with structures in particular that Europe has set up on its own is that they've never been able to deploy. And what happens when you have a coalition of the willing is you go around the table and one state needs an EU resolution, the next one needs 2 votes in both houses of parliament, the next one needs a UN resolution. And what you end up with is a coalition of the willing, which doesn't actually provide your foes with any kind of deterrent at all, because as we know from the EU battle group, it's never actually been able to deploy. It's formed in 2007. It's never got out the door, precisely because it relies on people having to think about it on the day. And if they don't fancy it, or they're having a difficult time in Parliament and they know they won't win a vote, they can't do it. So that's what will provide a deterrent, is understanding the response from these organizations, these nations, if Russia does step over the line again.
Right. Can I just ask you this? So you've been Defence Secretary, and people like me are always commenting, we need more independence from the United States. We can't be entirely reliant on the whims of the president. And it's obvious that the whole of the United States population is moving away from the sort of global engagement that, the back the Truman doctrine that was important to someone like Eisenhower or John F. Kennedy. It's a different world now, and America's got different strategic interests, and the population's got different ideas. So we have to be ready to face our own responsibilities. So I suppose the issue isn't just the coalition of the willing, it's the coalition of the willing to pay for it. How practical is it for Britain, as an example of one European state, to have a defence policy that's more independent of the United States when we're so much smaller in terms of both both population size, but also our willingness to pay for these commitments? We seem to be a mile away. Is that a fair summary, or do you think there are things that we could do that would move us closer, be more realistic?
I think that we should be able to act in our own interests, even if that means in some circumstances acting alone. And I'm someone that wants us to stay close to the US. I want us to still be working, as we always have, very closely with their armed forces, and I do see that continuing into the future. But we have an opportunity now. Warfare is changing, and we're moving away from very expensive big platforms to much more nimble uses of technology. Warfare itself is changing. We're not likely to see tanks, queuing to get on the Eurostar to come over to Britain. We are likely to see, and we do see, cyber attacks on our critical national infrastructure. People plotting to poison our water supply, all sorts of things like that. So it's about home resilience as much as it is about the ability to deploy around the world. We aren't doing enough on this. Everyone is saying that. Most commentators now think that we are going to be facing a conflict situation of the type I've just described, or worse, in a few years' time, if we don't actually rebuild our own resilience at home and plug the very serious capability gaps we have in defense. And the US president is right. He's got at least one thing absolutely right. If you show your strength and you show that you're a capable nation and that there are consequences to trampling over your interests, you are more likely not to have to face a conflict situation. Deterrence is a great return on investment for a nation. And the old guns and butter argument, I'd say if you don't have guns, kiss goodbye to the butter. If you can't keep trade routes open, you can't keep the NHS functioning, you're going to be in trouble as a nation.
Well, Penny Morduant, former Defence Secretary, thank you very much indeed for joining me.